drugs open the door to a better world for me. The problem is when you go through that door too often, it becomes a revolving door. And rather than me using the drugs, I ended up being used by the drugs. And I went through 20 odd years of hell. And I went to numerous rehabs, numerous detoxes. I was in and out of the rooms. I've probably collected enough white key rings to tile a bathroom in my day, and probably quite a few coloured key rings, which I didn't deserve because I lied my whole way through that recovery. Um, it got to a stage in my addiction where I turned to crack that I hardly recognized myself anymore. And I would be lying on the floor in my bedroom, my world ever decreasing, and hating myself and not recognizing who or what I'd become, and feeling a tremendous sense of shame and guilt as a result of that. Suicidal idolization was an everyday occurrence for me. And somehow, I can't really remember how, but somebody suggested Ibogaine for me, and magically a kind of door opened for me, and I went to a really fantastic provider. Um, Very interesting, but this particular provider at one point didn't feel that I was ready to do Ibogaine, and he denied me treatment, and he delayed the treatment on me, which I think actually in the long term was the biggest gift he ever gave me. And I did Ibogaine, and it was the first time that I ever owned my recovery. It was the first time I didn't look externally to get fixed. It was the first time that I was able to go into a process, a monomythic journey, as or a hero's journey, if you want to call it that, where I felt that I had sovereignty and ownership, and that it was my journey, and I didn't need to look to an outside entity to cure me or mend me. This time, I could actually mend myself, and I think Ibogaine gave me the tools to be able to start doing that. And so, 10 years on or 12 years on from my addiction, I'm here and I'm helping people move through the same process myself. And I've met some very, 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 very beautiful people along the way, some wonderful, wonderful friends that have come out of this industry. And, I'm extraordinarily grateful to be alive. In many ways, I think that in retrospect, I'm grateful for my addiction because the addiction was the taxi that brought me to a place where I could find myself. Um, and I never, ever, ever dreamt that I would take that view of my addiction.
Thanks,
So
Sam.
that's a little bit about my origin story, I suppose.
Can you talk a little bit about preparation, how you prepare for a journey? We know we're working with somebody right now, and people come to certain obstacles or places that are difficult. Even if they want to do navigate, they'll come to certain turning points where they'll try to self-sabotage themselves or suddenly have all this resistance to doing something that they actually want to do. And I would love it, Anders, to talk a little bit about what's going on with that.
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, if we were looking at any sort of a Aboriginal or Indigenous culture where you were taking an entheogen or a psychedelic, you would be working with the village elders for days, if not weeks, before you're allowed to ingest the medicine. And the whole point of that is to, prepare you spiritually and emotionally, and set and setting. I mean, that's one of the classic things, and I'm a great believer that if if you can help the client find intentionality and integrity and respect and reverence for the process that they're going on, but they see it as a hero's journey, a monomythic journey of some type or another, um, and that they have authorship and sovereignty of that, and if you can guide them um, on the way to taking Ibogaine in the right way, what you have is a client who is attaching to the treatment and leaning into the treatment. They're not just turning up and taking Ibogaine and expecting a miracle. They're bringing themselves to the Ibogaine, and they are making themselves part of that process, not just turning up. Um, so for me, I think it comes in two areas really. What we want to do is have an understanding of the conditioned narratives that brought people into addiction in the first place. You know, I have a little quote I like to use with my clients that, you know, addiction is really no more than self-medicating against a profound sense of inauthenticity. Um, People who are in deep addiction just don't know who they are. They've lost their way. Um, and so if we can help them break down the whys behind their addiction, the whys behind their pain, if they can start to break down the conditioned narratives, whether those be familial, societal, educational, you know, the expectations put on them by friends and family, and perhaps just being an average Westerner trying to make their way through lives. If we can help them see that, you know, at some level, let's, yeah, let me put it this way. I think many of us at a very early age learn not to be ourselves. Expectation is placed upon us in a myriad of ways. And we often get the feeling that, well, you know, I've got to change who I am because I'm not good enough as I am. And if I don't behave in a particular way, if I don't become an actor and play the role that is expected of me, I won't survive. And what happens is when people, especially children, pretend to be something in order to appease parents or school or whatever, there is a very, very, very high chance that they lose their authentic self, their authentic being. And, you know, in many ways, if you're playing a role to appease others, maybe you have to deny certain aspects of your personality or your psyche. Maybe you can't be emotional. Maybe you can't be frightened. Maybe you can't be vulnerable. And when we deny those parts of our psyche, we create a hole in our chest. And I think young Pueblo said it really, really beautifully. He said, let me paraphrase this. Um, the only thing I've ever truly been addicted to is filling the void I feel in my chest with anything other than self-love. So part of pre-treatment is to start looking at why the void, why that pain. And then the other thing is to bring the client to the treatment. And you know, if the client has, you know, considered what they're going to wear, considered what playlist they might be listening to after, have drank plenty of coconut water before they come there, they've jumped through this hoop, they've jumped through that hoop, they've really, really brought themselves to the Ibogaine provider, the efficacy of the treatment is very, very, very different. There's also another thing about pre-treatment, which I think is incredibly important, is the work you do in pre-treatment informs the integration and it informs whether the integration is going to be done proactively or reactively. Um, so for me, I think the perfect Ibogaine treatment needs pre-treatment, it needs the Ibogaine provision, it needs integration, it needs some quite a long runway to land after you've done the Ibogaine to find yourself. A deep and profound connection with play is always very, very, very useful. And then continued maintenance protocols, and they don't necessarily have to be psychedelic or entheogenic, and community. And, you know, the clients who create that paradigm for themselves and kind of author that paradigm for themselves, these are the ones who do really, really, really well because they have brought themselves and they brought their soul into the treatment. They haven't just turned up expecting a miracle. You know, give me Ibogaine. Let's hope I wake up as George Clooney in the morning. It never happens that way.
I'm curious why you choose to work with Iboga over Iboga.
Well, I mean, I prefer Ibogaine because it's essentially it's derived from Iboga. Um, it's far more controllable. If you're in a medicalized environment, which you need to be, if you are in addiction and you're coming out of addiction and you're going to go and do Ibogaine or even Iboga, it is absolutely necessary that the correct tests have been done beforehand, from liver panel tests to QT intervals, so an echocardiogram or an EKG, um, to an 18 chem test as well. It, for the provider, they know what they're working with when they've got Ibogaine. They know how strong it is. They know how many milligrams to give
We're going to
per
discuss this in
kilo
length
to
next
help
time.
people get out of
But
addiction. Whereas
Anders,
Iboga,
please,
depending on the age of the
can you
plants, it can
hear?
have very, very, very different strengths. So from a medical and a professional point of view about, you know, helping people get out of addiction, Ibogaine is far more reliable than Iboga in that respect. I hope that helps you.
Yeah, she just wants to know what an Iboga ceremony is like. And
Um,
Iboga treatment is like.
yeah, I mean, wow, what a question. It's such a difficult thing to describe, but it's a long, long process. Um, you could be with the medicine itself for
Somebody
12
should
to
mute
13
themselves.
hours. I mean, the Ibogaine ceremony itself. I mean, look, I'll take it back to my own original Ibogaine ceremony, where I think I had 16 milligrams per kilo of Ibogaine on board at the time I did it. Um, I went into a visionary state, and I would say 70% of clients go into a visionary state where they see the past and they see certain things which can add real benefit to the journey itself. 20% get partial visions and 10% get nothing. But I went through a kind of 12, 13-hour journey. And then on the other side of that, I had a day of deep and profound introspection, where it felt like that
Okay.
all the pain and all that has occurred to me, I became very thoughtful, very introspective, made a lot of epiphanies. We call this the gray day. It was quite painful and it was quite negative. And then I fell asleep. And then the next day I woke up after that. And I literally felt like I'd been reborn. Um, but every Ibogaine journey is entirely different depending on everybody has a different Ibogaine journey, and I'm a great believer that Ibogaine gives you what you need rather than what you want.
Yeah. He wants to know what happens with the noribogaine after the treatment. What happens? How does to the body, and what happens as it leaves your body?
Well, I mean, we believe that the noribogaine, the ibogaine is converted on via the liver, turns into noribogaine, and it's believed it's stored in the kind of the fat cells of the brain, and it stays anywhere within the system from 9 to 12 weeks after, depending on how much ibogaine you've had. And it's really quite an extraordinary thing when you have that noribogaine feeling where you just feel a little bit more connected, a little bit more alert. You become um, a much keener observer of yourself and your
Should we give
environment.
it?
So you have a kind of like a 2 to 3 month window where you have an opportunity to exchange bad ritual for good ritual, and it just seems that little bit easier. For me, this is the critical period that if you want to start to get up early and start to make your bed and start to buy flowers for your home and start to walk in nature and start to exchange bad ritual for good ritual, the Nor Ibogaine is that window where we're really able to start to change the way we attach to life and start to create new neural highways. And I think the Nor Ibogaine really helps with the neural plasticity of the mind. And post Ibogaine, that is the golden time, the 2 to 3 months post Ibogaine, that if you can attach to creating a new and meaningful and simple life for yourself, that's where it really works. And this is why I think it's so important that post Ibogaine people give themselves quite a long landing strip. um you know I do always worry about the client who does Ibogaine and returns to work on a Monday morning. um and they feel that, you know, maybe going back to work is more important than their healing. Um, that's one of the reasons that we like to do pre-treatment, is that we like the clients to see the bigger picture, not just an immediate fix. Um, but certainly, noribogaine is, and there is some debate whether it is noribogaine, but um, yeah, the 2 to 3 months post Ibogaine is that golden period where really deep and profound change can be made in very, very, very subtle and nuanced ways. Um, what I'm talking about is the minutiae, not necessarily the grand gestures, but getting the small things really well. Getting up in the morning, making your bed, not turning on your phone for the first half hour, so you don't go into a fight or flight response immediately. Taking time to see your friends, taking time to develop old relationships again, getting out into nature, getting fit. That's the 3 months post Ibogaine where you can really, really actually attach to your authentic self, attach to who you were supposed to be before the world got its hands on you. I've got to say that I'm not that great on talking about microdosing, but I do it. I mean, I kind of I'm very, very, very keen on clients post Ibogaine connecting to booster doses. One that can really help with post-acute withdrawal syndrome if you haven't done a slow protocol and you've done a flood dose. Uh, but also, I often like my clients to attach to a microdosing protocol of Iboga, maybe on that third month after they've done their Ibogaine, when the Nor Ibogaine is beginning to leave the body. A good microdosing protocol could give you another 2 to 3 months of feeling connected and mindful and observant, and helps one put integrity into the process to carry on the road. So I'm all for um, microdosing Iboga post post an Ibogaine treatment for addiction, but also from a psycho spiritual point of view, for anybody who
Okay, I'm gonna
wants
go sit
to
in the back.
um yeah, who anybody wants to develop a relationship with the medicine. Microdosing is a really fantastic way of doing that, and it's relatively safe compared to doing an Ibogaine treatment or an Iboga treatment. We've just had, unfortunately, a fatality in Costa Rica with Iboga. Um, so you know, but microdosing is a very, very, very good introduction to the magic of ibogaine and iboga. The microdosing is that incrementally you're putting the iboga into your system, but you don't necessarily have to go into any particular state to do so. And if it's managed by a professional like Gareth or Asher or Rocky, um, it can be an incredible tool to, you know, engender your self-worth and to connect to a process that, people really, really benefit from at the end of the day. But
Um,
yeah, certainly I would say that if you're about to microdose iboga or something like that, talk to one of the providers about the right way to do it. You know, perhaps buying it online and reading something in Reddit and going down that route is not really about putting much intentionality or integrity or respect and reverence into the process.
right. So let me address your second question, and then I'll go to a question from the Zoom audience. So in terms of access, that's what you're asking about. And I know there's this conversation going on about sustainability and Iboga and
Hmm.
not losing access for indigenous people who are using it. And I have a slightly different response to this. The way I feel is that, first of all, we're all indigenous to this planet, and plants don't belong to anybody. In fact, plants have traveled across in the hulls of ships for centuries and populated other shores. So this idea that Iboga belongs to any one culture is not something that I subscribe to. But even if somebody said Iboga is a problem, ibogaine can be extracted from the Wakanga plant, and Wakanga is already in manufacturing processes. So they get it from the bark, not from the root. So it could be done at scale. The other thing that I think is really important about this is if there was a will to do it, it would be done. During World War II, when they found out penicillin was a underfunded fungal project, and when they discovered that it did what it did for infections, countries got together with pharmaceutical companies and they fast tracked the industrial production of penicillin so that they could heal all these soldiers because nobody wanted a sick army.
Watching. It's so interesting, Anders, to hear you talk about your experience and your work. I know you've helped a lot of people. I really especially liked the comment that you made about the amount of energy that one puts into preparation will affect whether the integration is proactive or reactive. I think that's a very good way. And also, like, some people will say about preparation. There was a question in the group, I don't know if it was addressed, about how long one would need to abstain from various substances. And of course, my answer was it depends. But I think I wonder if you could speak to that in the context of my comment about pre and post, in addition to the the process. I mean, really, my
No,
questions are about safety in the process, but let's talk about that instead.
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, when we're talking about stimulants and alcohol and cocaine and meth and things like that, the standard amount of time to be off those is normally 7 to 10 days before you go in and do your ibogaine. Um, Now we are living in a very, very different world to when I first took ibogaine, 10, 11 years ago. Um, you know, and Gareth, who I work with quite a lot, will vouch for this, but the landscape of addiction has radically changed in the last 7 to 8 years. And now we've got fentanyl and cofentanyl, and most street drugs are cut with benzos, and treatments are becoming more and more and more complicated. I have one particular client at the moment who has taken literally about 3 to 4 months to even stabilize himself off this poly using that he's been doing. And he's been doing that in conjunction with a doctor. And then to help him get off the um, fentanyl, he's going to be put over to a morphine sulfate script for a couple of months and bring that down to a level where he can get over the line to go and do the Ibogaine. So I think the landscape of Ibogaine treatment is entirely different to what it used to be, where literally, you know, in the good old days of just pure heroin, you know, people could literally phone up a clinic on a Thursday, arrive on a Monday, get dosed on a Tuesday, and leave on a Friday. Not that I would ever agree that that's a good way of doing it, but you know, Ibogaine treatments are invariably a lot more complicated these days. Um, you know, there's all sorts of weird and wonderful research chemicals or research drugs which are coming through the doors, which we don't know much about the contraindications and things like this. I mean, I think this is a perfect example as to why pre-treatment and a fully medicalized treatment protocol is absolutely necessary. It is standard. And you know, I talk a little bit, but you know, somebody did die in Costa Rica at an Iboga ceremony last month, and from what I've heard, there was no EKG, there was no liver function test, there was no, you know, blood panels done. Um, and somebody died as a result of that.
This
And
is
you know,
this
that's totally unacceptable. I was going to do an Ibogaine treatment tomorrow, and you know, I've been out of addiction for a long time. If I was going to do an Ibogaine treatment tomorrow, I would do every single test under the sun to make sure that I am a viable candidate. And if my provider is not insisting on that, then they're not a provider. They're something else. They're you know, looking at the client as a revolving door cash cow. Um, if the provider doesn't have the integrity to insist on certain medical tests in order to make sure that the client is a viable candidate, then they're doing the client a tremendous disservice. They're doing Ibogaine a tremendous disservice, and they're doing themselves a tremendous disservice. And the sad thing about the Costa Rica paradigm is that Ibogaine got banned in Costa Rica 10 or 12 years ago, I believe, or maybe 8 years ago. And now we've had an Iboga death because of negligence in many ways, because these tests haven't been made. And, you know, one of the best places in the world to perhaps work with Ibogaine and Iboga has now been taken away from us because someone is selfish and taking risks and, you know, not available for the client. We are here to heal people. And that's incredibly important to me. And this is why, you know, in the 10 years that I've been working within the Ibogaine industry, I've probably worked with actually 20 providers, and I'm only working with 4 or 5 now, because at some level they would have let the client down where they were either more interested in money. You know, I've had clients who have been in active withdrawal and have been left in a corridor for 4 hours, and then the first person at the clinic they see is the secretary with the credit card machine. And you know, this is why I feel that what Lakshmi is doing, and actually many of the people who are in the audience who are Ibogaine providers at the moment, are actually the good people within the industry. So I think, you know, Lakshmi's vision is incredibly important, that, you know, we're looking at a medicalized end-to-end treatment that has pre-treatment, that has the Ibogaine provision, that has a long landing strip, integration, community. Um, for me, this should be just the standard. This is how the industry should be done. But there are many people who don't look at it like that. And if it's done that way, this medicine is is truly, truly, truly extraordinary. If we can support the people properly, if we can support the addicts coming through our door, or the people suffering from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or traumatic brain injury, or anxiety, or depression, or burnout, you know, to be honest, I mean, you know, every treatment is the same in that respect, whether you're going in for complex post-traumatic stress disorder or addiction. It is a psycho-spiritual journey. It is about getting into the depths of your soul and recognizing that underneath all of that bullshit and crap, there is a wonderful person beneath it, waiting to blossom. And that's what we see the whole time. This medicine can be extraordinary in allowing people to blossom into something quite beautiful. And why the institutions and why the governments and why big pharma do not want that and actively kind of suppress ibogaine over the last 100 years, and especially since 62, since Lotsof found out about it. So, you know, its efficacy for you know, we're living in 2024, and Howard Lotsof discovered that ibogaine was incredibly effective with helping people get out of heroin addiction in 1962. We're talking 70 years of suppression here. This medicine should be an absolute go-to medicine for addiction. As you know, the rehab business is extraordinary. It is a business which is growing at something like 4 to 6% a year, based on abject failure. You know, myself, I mean, I've been through 3 or 4 rehabs, and you know, by the time I got out of them, I felt so depressed and so anxious about myself that the first thing I had to do was go and use. Um, there's not a lot of compassion within the system for people in addiction. And I think this is the beautiful thing about ibogaine and the providers that are out there doing this work, is that they are, by and large, a lot of them are really, really decent, kind, empathetic, compassionate, caring people who will take huge risks in order to give people their lives back.
Yeah.
You know, and also, you know, I've got to add a caveat to that. There's a lot of shits in the ibogaine industry as well. You know,
Tori is asking about the neuroscience of what happens in the brain with these medicines. Anders, you might want to answer, or someone else in the audience, if Rocky wants to answer.
I would like to pass it to somebody else when it comes. You know, I'm that's not my lane, the neuroscience. So I'm really, really sorry.
Hey, Rocky, are you there? Would you like to answer?
Yeah, I'm here. I mean, I'm a layman, so it's like I can't go into the ultra science of it. But what we observe is that it's breaking down the neural network of the delivery system of the obsessive compulsive loop that we've developed as a result of how it makes us feel. So the brain is like a muscle, and as you add a drug to your body and it's delivering the neurotransmitters of the feel good, the brain remembers it and starts to build new pathways in repetition and turns into a 5-lane freeway. So it's almost just a compulsion to continue to use the drug. And ibogaine basically ripping that apart. And to some degree, it actually damages the nerve delivery system. The noribogaine, all right, so that's ibogaine brings it down. The noribogaine creates neuroplasticity. So this is a really wonderful plant, and how it actually is taking one thing to an end, but it's also offering exactly what you need to rebuild it. I mean, that's kind of the short of it. And it's not just rebuilding it's turning the 5-lane freeway into a windy road, kind of like how Anders was referencing the post-treatment, and how there's a period of innocence and there's a period of Aravinda used to say, with an ear to the heart. In other words, it's bringing you down out of your head and back into your body. It's allowing for you to once again rediscover life. And you know, I mean, it's an incredible plant. We just witnessed somebody that had neuropathy in his feet, and he could feel the medicine in his feet working. And within a 48-hour period, feeling had been restored. So somehow it's working through the nerve channels, and not just in the brain, but throughout the whole body, and is opening these things. So the norepinephrine is really the primary healer of what's going on inside. The drug interruption aspect of it is, as we all know, but really maintaining that norepinephrine. And yes, Anders, you were saying in reference to, if you maintain a small dose of ibogaine, you can carry on your norepinephrine throughout the whole course of a year with just small doses every 4 to 6 weeks. So I hope that answers the question.
I love exactly what Rocky said there about a 5-lane motorway, and that's often what I talk about with the clients post Ibogaine, is that there is an opportunity to open up some A and B roads, and the more you go down the A and B roads, there's a new vista, there's a new way of connecting, there's a new landscape, and the more you do that, the more the 5-lane motorway is going to grass over. But the 5-lane motorway will always be there. And that's why we have to be really tenacious in creating those new roads post Ibogaine for that landing period. And then, the wonderful thing is that they then become your new habits and your new way of being. And it can open life up to you in an incredible way. Ibogaine offers the opportunity to embrace life in a way that I never ever felt was possible or dreamt of. And that was the miracle of Ibogaine for me and for many of my clients. Um, so it's a big and special medicine, but it does need the client or the individual to attach to this medicine with profound curiosity, with profound intentionality and integrity and respect and reverence. And if they're attaching to the medicine that way, well, actually, they're attaching to themselves that way, and that's where the miracles can occur. I think it's the most extraordinary journey anybody can take. Is if you do Ibogaine, do it properly.